It was late autumn when the boy found himself waiting alone at the edge of a quiet bus stop, his backpack heavy on his shoulders. Not because of books, but because of the weight in his heart. He had been drifting through days like a shadow unnoticed. Uninvited into the warmth of friendships, halls filled with voices seemed to echo around him, but never include him. He felt invisible to teachers, to classmates, even to his own family, who seemed too busy or too tired to notice the silence growing. Inside him, he had begun to believe that nothing would ever change, that his life would be a straight road of loneliness without color or meaning. So he sat under the dim light of the bus stop, his breath forming faint clouds in the cold air, and he told himself that perhaps he would always be alone. Then from the corner of the street came the slow, steady steps of an old man, his coat worn, his hat pulled low, his face marked with lines of years that looked both heavy and kind. He carried nothing in his hands, yet seemed to carry a presence that filled the empty night. He sat down beside the boy without a word, and for a moment they shared silence, two strangers bound by the chill of waiting. The boy kept his eyes fixed on the ground, afraid to speak, afraid to be judged, until the old man cleared his throat and said softly, "The hardest battles are fought in silence." Inside the heart, the boy, startled, turned his head and saw eyes that looked as if they had known storms and still carried calm. He wanted to look away, but something in those eyes held him. The old man continued, "I used to sit at bus stops like this, wondering if anyone would ever notice me. I thought I was a mistake in the world. But I was wrong. You are not invisible. Even if you think no one sees you." Heaven, as the boy felt something stir inside, a warmth that pressed against his chest, he whispered, almost ashamed, "But why does it hurt so much? Why does it feel like I do not matter?" The old man smiled, a small, tired smile, because pain has a way of lying to us. It tells us we are alone when we are not. It tells us we are worthless when we are precious. It blinds us from seeing that even our breath is a miracle. He paused, then leaned closer and said, "Every life has weight, every tear has meaning, every lonely night can become a seed for compassion in someone else someday." The boy blinked back tears, his throat tight with words he had never spoken. He said, "Nobody has ever told me that before. I feel like nothing is ever going to change." The old man shook his head slowly. "Things do change, but not always when we demand it. Change comes when we choose to believe that the next step is worth taking. Even when we cannot see the road, you will meet people who need your story, your kindness, your strength, born from these nights. One day you will be the reason someone else knows they are not alone." The bus rumbled faintly in the distance, but the boy did not want the moment to end. He asked, almost pleading, "Who are you? Why are you telling me this?" The old man looked up at the sky where stars glimmered faintly through the city haze and said, "Just someone who was once where you are now. Someone who almost gave up until a stranger spoke hope into me. I promised that if I ever saw another soul drowning in silence, I would remind them they are seen, they are loved, they are chosen." He placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder, and for the first time the boy did not flinch from touch. Instead, he felt something break and heal all at once, as if years of isolation cracked open to let light inside. The bus finally arrived, its doors hissing open. The old man stood and said, "Take this ride. But remember, life is more than rides home. Life is the journey of knowing you are not forgotten. Keep walking, keep breathing, keep believing, for one day you will tell another what I have told you now." The boy wanted to stop him, to ask his name, to hold on to this fleeting miracle. But as he turned to grab his backpack, the old man stepped back, and when the boy looked again, he was gone, vanished into the night, as if carried by the quiver. When the bus driver called for him to hurry, and he stepped inside, sitting by the window, staring at the empty space where the stranger had been, his heart beat faster, not from fear, but from something new, hope, fragile but real. He pressed his forehead to the glass, whispering to himself, "I am not invisible. I am seen. I am loved." And in that whisper, the boy felt stronger than he had in years. And in the days that followed, the memory stayed alive in him like an ember refusing to die. When he walked the crowded school halls, he no longer heard only the echo of voices shutting him out. He began to listen differently. He began to see differently. In the cafeteria, he noticed a girl sitting alone, picking at her food in silence. And though fear tugged at him, he remembered the words, "Keep walking, keep believing, so he carried his tray to her table and sat down without needing to say much. His presence was enough. She lifted her eyes surprised, and for the first time he saw his reflection not as invisible, but as someone with the power to change the atmosphere. Weeks later, he found himself talking to a boy from another class who was being bullied. He did not give long speeches, he simply said, "I know what it feels like to be alone, but you are not alone anymore." And those words were heavier than any insult, lighter than any laughter. They became seeds, just as the stranger had told him, and slowly the boy began to realize that his life was not a mistake. His pain had given him a heart that could see hidden sorrows in others. He did not need crowds or applause. He only needed to live with the certainty that heaven saw him, that his existence carried meaning more than he had ever imagined. Sometimes at night, when he could not sleep, he would replay that moment at the bus stop, every detail, the worn coat, the steady eyes, the hand on his shoulder, and he wondered if the old man had been real, or if perhaps he had been an angel sent to keep a promise. But the answer no longer mattered. What mattered was the truth planted in him, a truth that grew like a tree with roots sinking deep enough to hold him even when storms returned years later. As he grew older, whenever he felt doubt or loneliness creeping back, he whispered again, "I am seen, I am loved, I am not forgotten." And those words steadied him. They carried him into conversations, into friendships, into courage he never thought he had. He began writing down the memory in a small notebook, not with fancy words, but with honesty. He carried that notebook everywhere, sometimes reading it in the back of the classroom, sometimes before he slept. He wrote reminders for himself: "You matter, you are chosen, you are alive for a reason." Slowly the notebook filled with sentences that were not just for him, but for anyone who might need them. One day he began to share them, leaving notes in library books, taping small slips of paper on lockers, each one carrying words that had once been spoken to him. And every time he saw someone pick one up, his heart swelled with the same warmth he had felt at that bus stop. He began to see that life was not about waiting for someone to notice him, but about noticing others. He learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to speak even when the voice trembled. He became the kind of friend who listened more than he spoke, who paid attention to silences as much as words. And though the ache of loneliness still visited him from time to time, he now carried an anchor that held him steady. The memory of the stranger who had vanished like mist, but whose words had become permanent fire in his soul. Years passed, the boy grew into a young man, and the bus stop became a sacred place to him. Every time he passed it, he slowed his steps, remembering the night hope found him. He would sometimes sit on that same bench, not because he was waiting for a bus, but because he was waiting for courage to rise again. And sometimes when someone sat down beside him, looking lost or tired, he would turn with the same calm eyes the stranger once had, and say softly, "The hardest battles are fought in silence, inside the heart." And he would watch as surprise flickered across their face, as if they too were hearing something they desperately needed. And in that moment, he knew the legacy was alive within him. And tonight, as you hear this story, maybe you are at the edge of giving up. Maybe loneliness has whispered too long in your ears, telling you lies that you are forgotten and unseen. But I tell you, you are not invisible. Heaven sees you. Heaven loves you. Heaven has chosen you. Let this story remind you that the smallest encounter, the gentlest word, the quietest stranger can change everything. Let this be the hand on your shoulder, the voice in your silence, the ember in your night. If this touched you, do not keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who might need light in their darkness, and subscribe to Faith Light Stories, so that together we carry the legacy forward, proving that hope is never far away and that none of us are ever truly alone.